Um, now, I think we have a good day planned. Sometimes I think the reason for the day or half day is manifestly obvious. So, for example, our last one was new developments in geophysical technology, or words to that effect. It's pretty clear what that's about and why we're causing it to happen. This one is, roughly speaking, is there any oil other than onshore in East Africa? And why is that an interesting question is what I want to spend a few minutes on. And I want to begin with the slide that's already in front of you. As you're all aware, and probably one of the reasons you're interested in the forum is that there have been some major significant gas discoveries in East Africa, which even the Daily Mail has recognised, but setting a high standard, but is all over the media. And the very significant discoveries that have been made over the last 2 to 3 years after East Africa really, particularly offshore, being regarded as a backwater. This is a typical example. This happens to be, I thought about showing you the Bloomberg TV clip from which these words were derived, but the problem with Bloomberg is you can't copy the clip, you have to access it online, and you never know what little advert is, some of them faintly embarrassing, going to pop up in the middle. So I decided just to use the words instead. But this is the sort of press that the area, and particularly Mozambique and Tanzania, have been getting in the US and British and no doubt elsewhere press. The general tone here is these things are almost in production. There's more than 50 TCF in Mozambique. It's worth $800 billion in value. Just shows you I'm a rather sad person, but I was trying to get sleep last night. I was trying to figure out how on earth they come up with a number like $800 billion. And this is being recorded for posterity, but being Bloomberg, of course, they know that the oil price is around $100 a barrel. And they probably also know that if you've got TCF of gas and divide by 6 or 7, you get billions of barrels of oil. So if you multiply sort of 7 or 8, maybe billion barrels of oil, you get, via the current oil price, you get, hey presto, $800 billion of value, which is pretty good calculation, obviously. But, and there are lots and lots of very bullish CEO statements at the moment from all sorts of companies, one of whom was given to saying that it will rival Qatar and Australia in terms of LNG. And you can see the comment, I mean, accurately enough, from the Statoil CEO at the bottom there, in helpfully picked out in red. Again, part of the 2-minute Bloomberg presentation on the topic. As an explorer and sort of E&P person, the thing that's wrong with this, of course, ultimately at its heart, is the inability to recognise the difference between prospects, resources that maybe have been discovered, and actual reserves. And we all know that you have to be particularly careful with gas, especially after the Shell reserve scandal of about 10 years ago, where the strong-minded CEO of Shell dismissed the absence of a gas market for the gas they were talking about as just a little bit of a detail, and proceeded to book the reserves, and is now facing a class action suit still, I think, in the US as a result. And it was a big scandal. So what people have learnt is, again, helpfully told to us by Statoil, is that the principles for booking of proved gas reserves are limited to contracted gas sales or gas with access to a robust gas market. They mean Norway when they talk about a robust gas market, or Norwegian facilities. They don't mean something in East Africa. So to book reserves, you need a contract, crudely. So what I thought it's worth doing is just digging around what we know about East African gas, what sort of costs it's likely to incur, and what it's competing with. And I make no apology here for repeating or reusing some material that our friends from Bernstein used a couple of times in the last 6 months. And one of the things I like about Bernstein, and why I'm always trying to get them to talk, is that what their great strength is that they collect insights from all sorts of companies, sort of ranging in size from Premier Oil up to ExxonMobil, about 40 of them. They go and visit these guys 3 or 4 times a year, and they get real data and insights as to what is going on, what these companies are thinking. So this graphic shows their view of probable LNG projects for the near future, and we'll dig into it in a little bit, and there's no need to sort of tip your head on one side and try and read it, because I will explain what's in there. But it crudely speaking, it's ranked according to cost. I mean, it's actually expressed as what break-even price of gas do you need to make these projects work, but it's essentially a cost matrix increasing at the left, and across the right is then the cumulative capacity that's being added as each of these projects come into fruition. Starting point is to note, and this is where I want to spend the next slide or two, all these in here are in the US and North America. So these are all North American projects. So generally speaking, first message is North American LNG has cost advantages compared with Eastern Mediterranean, Mozambique, anything you care to name in Australia, and so on. What's going on, of course, in the US is this, that US, particularly domestic gas prices, are incredibly low because they have so much, so there is a gas bubble. There are therefore a very large number, here they are, of probable projects, I think I would describe these, leading to huge 170 million tonnes of potential per annum gas proposed for export. And you can see a very large number of projects on the Europe-facing coast, and a large number of projects, especially in Canada actually, and then in Alaska on the Asia-facing coast. So this is all about exporting shale gas. And one thing to say is this is hugely controversial and political in the States at the moment, because the E&P companies that own this gas believe that by exporting LNG, they'll not only move their gas, but move domestic gas prices up, and up significantly, which they do need to do. That is being vehemently opposed. So that lobby in Washington is being vehemently opposed by another lobby, which says, no, we are domestic users of this gas, particularly chemical companies and the like, and we want to keep the prices down so that we have a feedstock for our industries, whether it's fertilizers or plastics or whatever they're making, and therefore export of this shale gas, which is a US national resource, etc., should be banned. And this is being fought out at the moment, and everything I've heard, which is not obviously complete, is that the people saying no, you shouldn't export this, are the loudest voices at the moment. But what this will come to, ultimately, is that President Obama will decree how much gas can be exported from the US. And the general sort of number he will come up with is believed to be about 60 million tonnes per annum, which is about a third of this, a little over a third. That's what people say. Whether that's what happens, I mean, this is Washington, loud voices on both sides. One day it'll be clear. But what is clear is some of it is going to happen, and some of it will get into the global market for LNG with the lowest cost base and start competing against all the other things that are going on, like West Siberia, Qatar, Australia, Eastern Mediterranean, and East Africa. And just to be clear, so there's a competitive dynamic in here which comes from the US, which has huge political overtones and is still to be decided, but will be decided probably within the next 6 months. Okay, so to sort of proceed from that then, where does East African gas fit in? And remember, I will talk about this as though it's my own work, but this is actually Bernstein's compilation of what they've been told. As I said, everything in here is basically US. You get into Alaska out here, you get into new Australian schemes out here and here. You get into Stockman in the Barents Sea, so the Russian, Nigerian, not Nigerian, Norwegian, median line, huge discovery, all out here, higher cost. Mozambique sits in here. And the general view, again, not mine in particular, though I would agree with it, is that Mozambique molecules won't start appearing till beyond 2020, which is still 7 years away, remember. And there is a history that we all know about and that I think has become more obvious in our industry, that projects which arrive on time, on budget, and at the production levels promised are, to say the least, unusual. So beyond 2020 is a not unreasonable thing to say, I think. The other point is, in doing this analysis, Bernstein have not forgotten about offshore Tanzania. It's simply not on here. And therefore they're not expressing a view other than that it's not in this probable set. So I think what that means is that it lies as a project or a set of projects, an LNG project, probably similar cost base to Mozambique or maybe slightly worse, and perhaps later, certainly further down the queue. I suppose that's what led me to the idea of today's forum, which is summarised here, that obviously the governments of Mozambique, Tanzania, and to some extent Kenya foresee economic transformation on the basis of all this gas, and particularly the reporting of it and the interest that's being taken in it. In reality, it's some way away, I would say, and if you want to look for early commercial benefit, then the most likely early commercial benefit is going to come from offshore oil discoveries, which, when there are more than 100 million barrels, can be developed in 4 years with an FPSO, which brings us this side of 2020 rather than the far side. So that is kind of, in a nutshell, why the topic arose. Of course, the question which arises is, other than onshore in the Rift, which is becoming increasingly well known, well explored, and remember, I am a non-exec at Tullow Oil, so I'm, could be accused of beating the drum for them. But oil onshore in the Rifts is well known, but I don't think anybody's yet figured out where it is offshore. And as much as anything today is moving from the wouldn't it be nice to find some oil theme to and where the hell might that be, because it's difficult to figure out. With that, I'm going to step back and start proceedings properly. And we will get into, in some detail, the story of what do we know about source rocks, what's working, how is Tullow managing to be successful in the rift, can we see any clues as to where oil might be offshore, and so on. But I've given you a little bit of context in the sense of why we might desire oil. Exploring without context is always a bit of a dangerous thing to do. And I always like to start these regional meetings off with a exploration of the context behind the countries, the politics, and the opportunities that exist. So today we have